It's a Thanksgiving Day edition of Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Locked On Steelers meets Locked On Bills for a huge AFC playoff matchup at Acrisure Stadium. Chris Carter, Joe Marino. We're going to break it down here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Chris Carter. He's Joe Marino of Locked On Steelers and Locked On Bills. And of course, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes of Locked On Steelers and or Locked On Bills. A reminder, this show is also a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is now the #1 sports podcast network in the world. Shout out to both of us being part of this great team here. And as always, Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL and you'll get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Joe, when was the last time these two teams played? Was it 2 years ago? It feels like it's been longer than that.
It's a playoff game. The playoff.
That's right.
Yes,
Snow
Mason
Bowl.
Rudolph. Yes, that one. This will be the sixth meeting between Mike Tomlin and Sean McDermott. And Chris, did you know that they were teammates at William and Mary in college?
Yes. Oh, trust me. I've heard this.
Have you been informed of that piece of this game? Let's go ahead and get that out of the way. You're going to see that a million times on the broadcast on Sunday.
I'm sure Tony Romo and Jim Nantz will bring it up 1,000 times. But it's an interesting year for both of these teams because the Steelers are still going through their rebuild mode. They're still, looking for answers to kind of get their way back. They've been rebuilding their offensive line, their defensive line. They brought in Aaron Rodgers for a rental, and so the Steelers kind of being 6-5, kind of where I think a lot of people expected them to be. But I got to say personally, I'm shocked that the Bills are sitting at 7-4 and battling for a wild card spot like the Steelers. They're a game ahead of the Steelers right now. What has gone on that has you seen has kind of gotten in the way of the Bills having the dominant season that I think a lot of us expected them to have?
Yeah, I mean, they come off a year where they kind of did a mini reset and went all the way to the AFC Championship game and took Kansas City to the brink. Expectations were higher than this. And like 7-4 is not a bad record, but We're talking about a Bills team that has the aspirations of winning the Super Bowl, and they certainly haven't looked like that type of team this year. They've been very, very inconsistent, and certainly injuries are a factor there, but offensively, sometimes they can show up and score 40. Sometimes they can show up and score 13. It's a very inconsistent offense that's fully capable, but week to week, you just don't know what version of it you're going to get. And it's raised a lot of questions about what's around Josh Allen, if Joe Brady is the guy that is the right coordinator for this offense, right? There's just a lot of questions that comes with it. And so it's 7-4, but 7-4 is not what this team was supposed to be in an absolute battle with the Patriots, who are kind of running away with the AFC East with a 10-2 record and a head-to-head win over the Bills. And the Bills have 2 divisional losses. And so they're going to need a lot of help here if they're going to win the AFC East for a 6th consecutive season. So it's a different vantage point. Obviously, huge game. The Bills are currently the 7th seed at 7-4. The 8 and 9 seeds are the Steelers and Texans. Well, they just lost to the Texans, and it'd be a tough one if the Bills can't get a tiebreaker over Pittsburgh as well.
Yeah, I imagine that would be hard. That would be a tough place to sit in, especially because if you're the Bills and you look at the rest of your schedule, you still got to play the Patriots. Joe Burrow's coming back, so that might not be as much of yourself. You still got to play the Eagles. You kind of need to get these conference wins, especially the wins against the team. Like the Steelers are the last team on their schedule that's kind of a wild card competitor. If you're just looking at that part of things here, but I think it's interesting that the Bills' offense has been so inconsistent. The Steelers' defense has been so inconsistent, but I think on the whole, it's been worse in their inconsistencies because at least the Bills can say, okay, well, yeah, we're inconsistent. We haven't showed up, but we're still 5th in points scored, 3rd in yards. We're still, we have the most rushing yards in the NFL. But the Steelers defense has struggled this year mightily to figure out who they really are since they're trading away of Minkah Fitzpatrick, bringing in Jaylen Ramsey. They've tried to be so many different versions of this defense. And I really thought and Locked On Steelers fans will know this, but if you're a Bills fan, you're like wondering, where has this defense been? It's really been up and down. After they lost to the Packers, they basically switched how they were doing anything on defense. That's when they moved Jalen Ramsey to safety. They traded for Kyle Duggar from the Patriots to bring him in as a strong safety. And then in the Colts game, Chargers game, and Bengals games, where they went 2-1 in that stretch, they called a lot of split high safeties where they were going cover 2, quarters, cover 6, and in ways to try to support their guys in coverage, let them be more aggressive, and they trust their defensive front to win a lot of those matchups. And it worked for the most part. It put the defense in a lot better position. They could be more aggressive, but then for whatever reason, they go up against the Bears last week, and they reverted back to their single high safety looks, a lot of cover 3 spot drop zones, and Caleb Williams picked them apart. And I think the thing that's going to be interesting, Joe, in this one is, do the Steelers try to keep being stubborn and go with that way, or do they go back to what was working with them? Because if I'm the Bills and they go into that cover 3 zone, I am eating that alive, because it doesn't matter what your receivers are. As long as they can run a simple route, they're getting open in those spots. And if I'm the Steelers, I'm trying to keep them from doing that. But if they are going too high safeties, that is where it invites the run game to come into play.
Yeah, one of the notes that I had down was the frequency in which Pittsburgh runs one high middle of the field close coverages. And so that's going to be your cover 1, your cover 3.
Yep.
And really that's going to dictate a lot of the throws to go outside. And the Bills are going to have to win some of those perimeter matchups. And I know that there's some questions about Joey Porter Jr., and I know that James Pierre's kind of been inserted into this lineup over Darius Slay. And then Porter gets hurt and Slay has to go in last week against the Bears. And so, the winning matchups on the outside hasn't been a real strength of this Bills football team. I know if it's going to be spot drop cover 3, they like those wrap ins, which I think it'll be a great way for the Bills to test that cover 3. But, if they're going to play more man, and the Steelers have run the 6th highest rate of man coverage so far in the NFL, can the Bills uncover? And that's a major question, especially if they're going to be without their starting right tackle. And we certainly know that while the pass rush for Pittsburgh has been inconsistent, we know it's very, very capable. And so, there's some real battles here, and it's going to be interesting to see which inconsistent unit, whether that's the Bills offense or the Steelers defense, can show up on Sunday. I think that'll go a long way in deciding who wins this one.
I think it does too. I think that these are the units that both sides have invested a lot into. Josh Allen, James Cook. They've invested in this O-line. The Steelers, they've invested all across their defense, the most expensive defense in the NFL these days. And I think that the Steelers, the big question is, can they stop the run? Can they contain Josh Allen and James Cook as a running duo without overcommitting to that, and so that they can play some more of those split safety looks and kind of take away things in coverage? Because if they're able to do that, it gives them that chance to be more aggressive, and then maybe force Josh Allen into some decisions that he would like back and get some turnovers. Because the Steelers, when they've been at their best this year, it's when they've racked up turnovers on teams. You go back, you look at how they beat the Colts. They got like 4 or 5 turnovers in that game. How they beat the Patriots, they got like 5 turnovers in that game. They were able to rack those up. And when I look at this game, I think that if they can, again, plug up the run with who they got up front, granted, they're going to be missing Derek Harmon. He's out with an injury. We'll talk more about the injury concerns on both sides and how that relates to matchups. But that's going to be a crux of this game. Can the Steelers win up front with their front 7? And if they do, can they follow it up with good pass coverage? Because if you're able to limit the run game, I don't think you can take away Josh Allen and James Cook as runners entirely. But if you can contain them and not let them break open the game, much like how they did to Jonathan Taylor, that puts your pass defense in a much better situation to be able to get stops, make plays, cause turnovers, then eventually kind of dictate the pace of the game. I guarantee you that is the Steelers' number 1 priority, is do not let the Bills run the ball.
Yeah, and I feel like from the Bills side of things that running the football is going to be a really important part of their success. We call this let James cook. They need to let that happen here on Sunday. I think the Steelers have been pretty average, right, with their run defense. The Bills have been a really, really good run of the football, I think, in just about any metric that you look at, their top 3. And where my eyes got a little wide in studying Pittsburgh is that they allow the 8th highest rate of explosive runs against their defense. And boy, we'll talk about the Bills run defense later. There's a lot of questions there, but that's one of the things that James Cook does, is he finds those explosive runs, and then kind of middle of the pack and stuff rate, success rate against missed tackles forced or allowed per attempt. And so I think for the inconsistency that the Bills will have passing the football. If they can get that run game going, test out Pittsburgh, that's going to be down Derek Harmon. It will be a big part of them finding some stability on offense. And then, of course, that opens up your play action game. So definitely a big storyline here is that Bills rushing offense against the Steelers defense.
Absolutely. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we want to go over the injuries on both sides because they have been mounting, especially of late, and it's going to have a big impact on how some of these matchups line up. I'll talk about that here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your Thanksgiving Day edition of that with Locked On Steelers, myself, Chris Carter, and Joe Marino of Locked On Bills. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I remind you this show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on all the action than FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or just want to ride a hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to who's going to have the next fourth quarter comeback. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. So head over to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Back here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Chris Carter. He's Joe Marino of Locked On Steelers and Locked On Bills. Joe, let's talk about the injury situation. The Bills have been missing Dalton Kincaid here and there, and I know because he's in like 3 of my fantasy teams, and I was expecting him to eat. And I've been so frustrated with this. But what's the update on his situation? Can he be expected to return this week?
Yeah, we're going to hear from Sean McDermott later in the day. We're recording this on Wednesday morning, so we haven't quite gotten that injury report from the Bills side of things. But he had a hamstring injury a couple weeks ago. He missed the last 2 games. Now, that was a Sunday into a Thursday. And so I think the initial thought was 2 to 4 weeks. We'll see. I don't feel super good about him being able to come back this week. They need him for sure. He's been their best offensive weapon in the passing game and really feels like he's taken that step here in year 3 to be that player that, so many were excited about. But availability continues to be an issue, and I don't necessarily feel great that he's going to go this week, but they certainly could use him.
Look, tight end has been a bane on the Steelers' existence for several years. So if he can go, it would change things. If he can't, it sort of helps the Steelers out a little bit. But the Steelers have their own fair share of injuries. Mike Tomlin giving us their injury report on Tuesday. Aaron Rodgers limited to start the week, but he said, quote, great optimism that he plays Sunday. He, of course, missed the last game for the Steelers. That was a bit of disappointment for them there. But when we got other guys, Alex Highsmith, he's missed the last 2 games. He's in a similar boat. They say, Mike Tomlin expecting him to be back. Broderick Jones, though, starting left tackle, out with a neck injury. No one's really sure how long that's going to be. He's been playing better throughout the year. This offensive line got a lot of guys. Broderick Jones, despite being a third-year player, this is his first year starting at left tackle. He's been growing there. Troy Fautanu, first year starting at right tackle after he missed last year with an injury. And then Zach Frazier and Mason McCormick, 2 second-year players at center and right guard. But Broderick Jones was the first pick that they made to start fixing this line. And now that he's out, probably going to mean Calvin Anderson or Andrews Pete starting in at left tackle for the Steelers. So that's something to watch out for. And then, as we noted earlier, Derek Harmon also out. He was their first-round pick this year, defensive tackle, who's been playing very well this season, especially against the run. But then other guys to keep your eyes on, Joey Porter Jr., who's really come on this year, and I thought has played very well the past month especially. He had a hip flexor that took him out of the last game. Mike Tomlin seemed to not be too stressed about him missing this week, but he's going to be limited to start the week. And then DK Metcalf also with an ankle injury. After he played through it in the last game, but it was very noticeable, especially in the fourth quarter. He was not able to get his full juice going on a lot of his routes, and I think the Steelers are going to be very cautious with both of those guys to start the week in practice.
Yeah, it's going to be some injuries on both sides of this. We kind of mentioned Dalton Kincaid and his availability up in the air. I don't feel good about starting right tackle Spencer Brown. Wasn't able to finish the Texans game with a shoulder injury. Same with starting middle linebacker Terrell Bernard. He wasn't able to finish with an elbow injury. I'd be stunned if either player was able to go, which, of course, you also are mindful of Ed Oliver and Michael Hoyt, 2 really important pieces. They're on injured reserve and won't be available for this football game. And so some key injuries on both sides of this equation. And guys, you in particular for this game you'd certainly like to have.
Yes, certainly. I mean, the Steelers are going to want to be physical, and we'll talk about the run game aspect of the Steelers and what they try to do on offense in a bit. But yeah, I look at some of these opportunities here on both sides. You know, we talk about Dalton Kincaid would be missing, and that's a tight ends matchup that the Steelers maybe don't have to worry about as much. But on the flip side, you know, for the Bills, you were talking about the receivers, and that's not exactly the Bills' strong point. But if Joey Porter Jr. is out, then your starting corners are most likely on the outside. James Pierre, who's an undrafted guy in like his 5th or 6th year in the league, and he's been solid this year. I think he has like 9 pass breakups, and he's been very good when targeted. So he's been really on his details. Darius Slay, who's been really rough this year, he's not a person you kind of want to leave in single coverage. He's not been good in those spots. But then also they went and got Asante Samuel Jr. In free agency a little bit. He sits on their practice squad right now. We have yet to see him, but in a game. But if Joey Porter Jr. can't go, it makes me wonder if they'll fire up the other junior of a former big name from the 2000s in Asante Samuel. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the Bills want to go at that secondary, whether or not Porter or Samuel or whoever starts back out there at cornerback.
Yeah, it's a good question, and certainly a new piece of the Bills this week is Brandon Cooks. They signed him. The Bills have been trying to get some wide receiver help. They signed Mecole Hardman, but he got injured. They tried to trade for Jaylen Waddle. It's been a big conversation really over the last, year, right, since Stephon Diggs was traded to the Texans. And so Brandon Cooks, I would assume, is going to make his debut this week, and that's an interesting layer to this offense. And, does Keon Coleman return? Or is he still in the doghouse? So there's some questions about, just what weapons will be there, whether that is a Kincaid or how Cooks factors in, or does Keon Coleman get back on the field? Do they elevate Gabe Davis from the practice squad again? I think that will happen. And so for as many questions as you might have about, how this secondary is going to line up and play, I think there's a lot of questions about what the Bills have in terms of weapons to attack and, what the priorities are going to be, which brings me right back to James Cook and the rushing offense, right? Yep. I think you want to try to lean on that as much as you can and allow that to help your play action passing game and, help your protection a little bit. I know that the Steelers pass rush hasn't quite delivered this year, but it's a very, very capable group, and it's a Bills offense that's not going to have the right tackle. And so it's the NFL is just about solving problems, right? Every team has adversity. Every team has issues. How do you deal with it? How do you overcome? No, the Bills aren't going to feel bad for the Steelers, for the guys they won't have. Steelers don't feel bad for the Bills, for the guys they don't have. The game counts. And so we'll see which coaching staff can get this thing figured out on Sunday.
Certainly, and trying to take advantage of those. It's why the coaches try to play these things close to the vest as possible. With guys.
Yeah, Chris, you're over here sneaking in questions to Mike Tomlin about coverage. I appreciate it, brother. That was a heck of a swing. Shoot or shoot, right?
Shoot or shoot. And hey, man, I even said afterwards, I was like, hey, man, I'm shot my shot. I'll shoot again next week. But for those who might not have seen it, it was just I was going back and forth with Mike about the cover 3 zone defense, because on defense, that's been such a liability for the Steelers. Whenever they drop back in it, it's like their guys do not understand how to operate with it. It's been so bad. They went away from it for like a month, and their defense shaped up really quickly, and then they went back to it, and they got shredded by Caleb Williams and the Bears. And so then, I asked about a play where the Bears just came out and trips right, and, it was obvious we're going 4 verts here against cover 3. I mean, if you played Madden, that's a good play call. And you just pre-snap, it was like, well, that's going to be a touchdown. And then it was just a walk-in touchdown. And, I tried to ask, hey, is that a situation where you check out of it? Is that a situation where you just need to call it better? Is that an execution? And he was just like, we don't get into those things here. And listen, you're not supposed, the coach is supposed to protect the information. So I appreciate it. But he did catch me trying to get some info in there out of that situation. But that's the thing, though, Joe, is that this secondary has been so up and down with its confidence, with its execution, with its fluidity. There's been times where they have perfectly blanketed people for like a 7-second play where they will just pass this guy off, pat that guy off. And they've been so good at times. But when they play these spot drop cover 3 zones, and they're doing one high safeties, they have been so bad. It's like they go for it's a polar opposite. And so if Joey Porter Jr. can't go, it's going to stress that even more on the outside, because he's been really good. And I do wonder how it's going to affect what the Steelers want to call on defense against the Bills, because if I know I have Joey Porter Jr. and I feel like James Pierre can run with whoever plays number 2 wide receiver for the Bills, on a given play, I might be able to say, hey, let's run man. Let's run man and be aggressive to stop the run. We'll trust those guys to win out on the perimeter. But if Joey Porter Jr. is not in and it's Darius Slay, they might think twice about that, and that could change up how the Steelers want to go about limiting the passing game and attacking the run game.
The Steelers have run the 6th highest rate of man coverage so far this year. And I hear you on the limitations of Darius Slay, but I mean, we're talking about having to cover like maybe Keon Coleman or Tyrell Shavers or 32-year-old Brains. If I'm Pittsburgh, I'm thinking a lot about playing man coverage and using some extra help to support my front in terms of the run defense and playing Kyle Duggar in some lower alignments. That'd be how I'd attack them. And then, obviously stress that right tackle. And, there's been teams have had a lot of success with their spy efforts and contain efforts of Josh Allen in the pocket. There's just not weapons that scare defenses. And so there's been a lot more attention on containing Josh Allen and, his pressure metrics, his third down metrics. Those vintage Josh Allen moments just haven't been there this year like they have in the past. And I think it's a consequence of what they're lacking at receiver. And I hear you on these Steelers concerns, but I don't know that the Bills are the offense that are ripe, to kind of take care of some of that stuff.
I hear you. Listen, I think that there's doubts on both sides. Both teams have been up and down throughout this year, but I think that's what makes this matchup really potentially special, is that you're going to see both teams with a sense of desperation, because if you're the Bills and you lose this game, then like you said, you plummet to that area where the Chiefs are at, where the Texans are at, and you're asking for trouble there. If you're the Steelers and you lose this game and the Ravens win on Thursday Night Football against the Bengals tonight, then you fall a game behind the Ravens and you have 2 divisional losses. Not 2 divisional losses. That's another conference loss. But then you play the Ravens still twice coming up, and the Steelers at one point had like a 4-game lead on the Ravens. So this is they do not want that to turn into a complete free fall, much like it did last year, where they lost 4 games straight to end the season. So I think it's going to be interesting with the injuries, but I want to talk about the Bills defense versus the Steelers offense and the matchups that'll come with that. That's all going to be next here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Crossover Thursday, Locked On Steelers, Locked On Bills. Stick with us. We'll be right back. Back here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter, Joe Marino of Locked On Steelers and Locked On Bills. Joe, when I looked at the numbers, I was kind of shocked to see that the Bills were so low in run defense. I knew that they weren't like elite or anything, or they're that good. I thought middle of the road, but geez, I saw that. What has been the Bills' problem stopping the run this year?
Boy, they're not very good at it. Let's just acknowledge that. They are not very firm up front with their defensive tackles. It's a group that gets worked off the ball. Not having Ed Oliver is a big loss. Daquan Jones is a very serviceable defensive tackle, but after that, there's really not guys that need to be on the field. Jordan Phillips can't anchor. Deion Walker, the Bills' 4th-round pick, has really been a flashy player. There's been a lot of good there, but still a guy that'll play with tall pads and get rooted out. TJ Sanders, their 2nd-round pick that they traded up for, has had to play defensive end due to a lot of the injuries. And that's just, he's completely out of position there. And, fitting the run when you have those contained responsibilities, not really his strong suit. Phi Mathis is a practice squad type player. They just really don't have the defensive tackle depth with Ed Oliver out and having to play a lot of young players to anchor. And then they have small linebackers that are more matchup style players. The Bills have been intentional about getting away from a traditional Mike and a Will, where I know the Steelers use Malik Harrison, right, as that downhill thumping player.
Right.
And then they bring in Peyton Wilson, and then, of course, Patrick Queen's your every down guy. Well, the Bills have 2 matchup style players that they like. They want linebackers that can play in space and cover, and their strong suit is not necessarily playing downhill. So when you have defensive tackles that are not very firm against the run and are more penetration style players, and you have backers that are a bit more matchup style and not downhill players, well, you're going to struggle to defend the run. And that's been something the Bills have to overcome every week. And the best way that they can overcome that is to score, right? And kind of get offenses out of that two-dimensional approach. But, if the offense doesn't score, well, then you got problems, and that's manifested a few times so far this year.
I think that's a very good point there about that, and you need to actually follow through, right, on who you're supposed to be. I think there's a lot of times where the Steelers defense they're one of the worst third down defenses in the NFL. They'll get 2 run stuffs and then give up the big play in the passing game. I think that's where it's going to be interesting. But on the flip side of the Steelers offense. The Steelers offense rushing wise doesn't look impressive on the whole. They're 27th in total yards, 23rd in touchdowns, 23rd in yards per attempt. That doesn't look special, but they've found something in the dual threat of Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell that I think could be really dangerous because they like to move these guys all around. They'll catch the ball out of the backfield. Their offensive line is coalescing and becoming a more consistent unit, which is giving them more space to work. And if I'm the Bills, I need to take that away. I need to force Aaron Rodgers, if he's the one, Aaron Rodgers, Mason Rudolph, whoever's facing me, you got to beat me downfield. You got to push this ball. I am not letting you just run me over with this rushing offense, knowing because that's what the Steelers would like to do.
Yeah, I feel that way a lot of times about the Bills. They're not usually a team that will sell out to defend the run. Now, they'll put their run stunts in there and gap exchanges to try to get negative plays. Like, that's what they want. The formula for the Bills defensively is, yeah, they're a lighter front that's more penetration style, but they want to get you in negative plays, right? And put you behind the sticks, and then you're one-dimensional. That's their whole entire objective. And, of course, the other part of that is their offense. And so they're usually pretty reluctant. There's a saying in the NFL that you have to earn the right to rush the passer. The Bills don't really believe that, right? They got to stop the run, right, to get that right to rush the passer and play on passing downs. And so I'm curious to see what type of emphasis they have there. And, especially if Metcalf's banged up and not, his full self, that's obviously a big deal. And certainly the tight ends are a huge part of the equation for Pittsburgh. We know all about that. And I was looking at some metrics. 61% of passing plays, the Steelers have at least 2 tight ends on the field. And what's so curious to me about this matchup is the Bills have been exceptional at limiting tight end production.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, they only allow 6 yards per game to opposing tight ends.
That's impressive.
In 11 games, they've only been thrown at 15 times opposing tight ends. Now, this is a new challenge, right? It's Freiermuth, it's Smith, it's the 311-pounder Darnell Washington.
Yeah, that guy.
And so I'm curious to see, how this different type of challenge is something the Bills deal with, because they've been handling the one tight end pretty good, but you got 3 of them here to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that the Steelers love. 13 personnel. They'll love 12 personnel. They will throw their tight ends out there. Darnell Washington, if he's not catching the pass, look out, because he's coming to crush you. They're like, look up. So, Joe, I know you watch tape, ball. I don't know if you saw some of those blocks that he had coming down the line against the Bears. I mean, he just destroyed some people as a blocker. But that's what he does. He uses his size. He's aggressive, and he's been very good at leveraging that, and he's getting better as a pass catcher. So I agree with you there. Pat Freiermuth, I feel like, has been underused by the Steelers. He could be better there. But that's where it's going to be really interesting. Can the Steelers strike that balance? Because the Steelers don't want to just be ground and pound. They don't want to just run the ball. They want to run the ball to balance things up. And I think there's been times where they pass to set up the run, or they've run up to set up the pass. Those are going to be the questions I have for the Steelers game plan as far as how they want to try to get things started.
Well, and for a question I have about the Bills is, how are they going to manufacture some pass rush? Chris, this pass rush is ice cold over the last 3 weeks. And this is post-injury to Ed Oliver, post-injury to Michael Hoyt. And Joey Bosa's playing on one hand. He's got a wrist injury, and he has not been the same in weeks. Over the last 3 games, since all of that happened, they're dead last in the NFL in sack rate. They're 29th in pressure rate. It is gone. And this is a Steelers offense where Aaron Rodgers gets the ball out quick, right? They get yards after catch is a huge part of the equation. They're the number 1 team in terms of percentage of passing yards that are after the catch by 7%. And so how do the Bills get any type of meaningful pass rush? And then can they tackle? The Bills have not been a good tackling defense. And that's something that Pittsburgh is going to stress you with their yards after catch opportunities. And, the Steelers have been really good at forcing missed tackles when they run the football. They're top 5, actually 4th in missed tackles forced per run. And so, the Bills are going to have to tackle. They're going to have to manufacture some pass rush, and those have been things that have been problems for them, really all season, but especially in the last 3 weeks.
I think it's going to be really interesting to see these two teams clash. They got strengths that meet other teams' weaknesses, their other teams' weaknesses, and vice versa. It's going to be really fun to see this play out over the next few days, and then eventually on Sunday, 4:25 kickoff time at Acrisure Stadium in Pittsburgh. He's Joe Marino of Locked On Bills. Joe, thanks so much for joining me here on this Thanksgiving for Crossover Thursday. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Thanks, Chris. Happy Thanksgiving to you. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. Appreciate you all being here. I have a lot going on, whether it's written or podcasting. Just go to thejoemarino.com. You can get in touch with all of it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joe, for joining me. Thank you all for joining us here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers, Joe Marino of Locked On Bills. Be sure to download this on your favorite podcasting apps or on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes